The wrench slipped from my hand and clanged against the concrete floor at exactly 6:47 a.m. when my phone buzzed with the meeting notification. Emergency all hands call in 15 minutes. Attendance mandatory. I picked up the wrench, checked the torque specs one more time, and knew something was about to break. Not the equipment that was running fine. Something else. My name's Roger Sinclair. Most folks call me Mac. I'm 58 years old, been working at Ironworks Solutions outside Pittsburgh for 24 years. Started here right after I got out of the Navy, back when this place actually built things instead of just talking about building them. The production floor was humming along like it had every morning for the past 5 years since I'd rebuilt the main line. Every bearing tolerance within spec, every pressure reading where it should be. You could feel it in the vibrations through the floor, smooth, steady, no irregularities. That's how you know a system's running right. I grabbed my safety glasses off the workbench and headed inside. The conference room was packed. 14 employees crammed into a space meant for maybe 50, with the overflow watching on laptops. I found a spot near the back, close to the door. Old habit from the service, always know your exits. Bryce Walsh was up front, grinning like he'd just solved world hunger. 32 years old, MBA from Northwestern. Been with the company exactly 6 months. His suit probably cost more than most of our guys made in a week. He'd gotten the VP of Operations job after the old VP retired, and he'd been making changes ever since, not improvements, changes. Today marks a new chapter for Ironworks Solutions. He started clicking through his slideshow. Same corporate buzzword soup he'd been serving since day one. We're optimizing our delivery systems across all client interfaces. I checked my digital calipers out of habit, still reading exactly 0.0000 inches. Some things you could count on. The presentation droned on. Synergy this, paradigm that. I'd heard it all before. Different suits, same empty words. But then he got to the part about our biggest contract, the $14 million automated production line we were building for Garrett Automotive. Moving forward, we're streamlining communications with our enterprise clients, Bryce announced. I'll be taking point on the Garrett project personally. That made me look up from my calipers. The Garrett project was mine, had been for 5 years since we first bid on it. I'd written half the safety protocols myself, worked directly with Linda Garrett at their compliance office to make sure every federal requirement was covered. My certifications were literally written into the contract language. The Garrett contract wasn't just another manufacturing deal. It came about because their previous contractor, Hoffman Industries, had screwed up spectacularly. They'd installed a $12 million automated line that ran for exactly 3 weeks before federal inspectors shut it down. Turns out Hoffman's safety officer had quit mid-project, and they'd tried to cover it up by having some junior engineers sign off on systems he'd never seen before. When the dust settled, Garrett was out $12 million and facing federal fines. That's when Linda Garrett, their new compliance director, decided they needed bulletproof contracts going forward. She'd been burned once and wasn't about to let it happen again. I remember the negotiation sessions in 2019. Linda and I spent 3 weeks hammering out every detail, making sure there was no wiggle room for corporate games. The clause that mattered most was 6.4b. Named Safety Compliance Officer must maintain direct project oversight throughout contract duration. Voluntary resignation or involuntary removal of said officer constitutes material breach, triggering immediate contract review and potential termination pending federal compliance audit. Linda had insisted on it. I need to know that whoever signs these safety docs will still be there tomorrow, she'd told me. Not transferred to another project, not promoted out of the role, not replaced by someone's nephew who just graduated. The same person, start to finish. I'd agreed because it made sense. Safety isn't something you hand off like a baton in a relay race. It takes years to understand the quirks of a complex system, to know which vibrations mean everything's fine and which ones mean you need to shut down before someone gets hurt. After the meeting, I cornered Bryce in the hallway, got a minute to discuss the Garrett transition. He barely looked up from his phone. What's to discuss? We need fresh eyes on that account. You've done great work, but it's time to let the next generation take the lead. The contract specifies that I maintain direct oversight of safety compliance. Federal requirement. We'll work around that. There are always workarounds. I felt my jaw tighten. In the Navy, we had a saying, there's the right way, the wrong way, and the Navy way, but there was no working around federal safety regulations. That's how people got killed. Bryce, those aren't suggestions in the contract. They're requirements. OSHA doesn't negotiate. He finally looked at me, that condescending smile spreading across his face. Mac, I appreciate your concern, but you're not seeing the big picture. We need to modernize our approach. Your methods are a little dated. 24 years of keeping production lines running, and he called my methods dated. I could feel the tension building in my shoulders, the same knot I used to get in the service when some fresh officer would show up thinking he knew better than the petty officers who'd been running things for decades. The smart ones listened. The others usually found out the hard way why experience mattered. Have you read the contract, Bryce? Of course I've read it. I read everything that crosses my desk. Section 12, subsection 6.4b. What's it say? His smile flickered for just a second. Look, Mac, I don't have time to get into the weeds on contract language. That's what legal is for. The important thing is that we're moving forward with a fresh perspective. He hadn't read it. 6 months on the job, taking over a $14 million contract, and he hadn't bothered to read the safety requirements. In the Navy, that would have gotten you court-martialed. You should read it, I said, especially before you start making changes. I'll take that under advisement. He walked away, already pulling out his phone, probably to call someone about optimization strategies or paradigm shifts or whatever other MBA nonsense was rattling around in his head. That afternoon, I pulled the original contract from my files. All 847 pages of it, including appendices. I'd kept both hard copies and digital backups, stored in 3 different locations. Old Navy habit, critical documents get redundancy. Clause 6.4b was on page 312, right where I'd left it 5 years ago. The language was crystal clear. No ambiguity, no room for interpretation. Linda's legal team had made sure of that after the Hoffman disaster. Over the next 2 weeks, I watched my access disappear piece by piece. First, my name got dropped from the client email chains. Then my ID badge stopped working on the Garrett project folders. When I tried to log into the compliance tracking system I'd built, permission denied. I didn't make a fuss, just documented everything. Saved every email, every access denial, every meeting I got uninvited to. Old Navy discipline: when something's going wrong, you record it. Evidence matters when the inquiry board convenes. The breaking point came during the quarterly all-hands meeting. Same conference room, same overcrowding, but this time it was being broadcast to all 3 of our facilities. 140 people in person, maybe 200 more watching remotely. Bryce was presenting the quarterly safety metrics, my safety metrics, from systems I'd designed and maintained. He was taking credit for everything, talking about innovative approaches to compliance management and next-generation safety protocols. Halfway through his presentation, I unmuted my microphone. Bryce, a quick clarification on slide 7. The room went quiet. He stopped mid-sentence, that fake smile flickering for just a second. Mac, we can discuss the technical details offline. Actually, this affects everyone here. You're showing a 99.7% uptime rating for the primary production line. That number comes from the vibration analysis protocol I implemented 3 years ago. The one you just eliminated from the maintenance schedule. His smile was gone now. Mac, this isn't the appropriate forum for operational minutiae. When it comes to safety, every forum is appropriate. That's what the federal inspectors told us after the incident in 19. I could see him getting flustered. His face was starting to flush, and his voice was getting that edge that meant he was losing control. Same look I'd seen on young officers in the Navy when they realized they were in over their heads. Thank you for your input, Mac. Let's keep the presentation moving. I should have left it there, should have unmuted and let him finish his dog and pony show. But 24 years of watching incompetent management make decisions they didn't understand had worn me down to bare metal. One more thing, Bryce. Since you're taking personal responsibility for the Garrett contract, I assume you've reviewed the compliance requirements in Section 12? Of course I have. Good. Then you know about Clause 6.4b. The room was dead silent now. Even the remote attendees had stopped typing in the chat. I could see faces in the crowd. Guys I'd worked with for decades, all turning to look between Bryce and me like they were watching a tennis match. What about it? His voice was tight. The one that requires the named safety compliance officer to personally approve any operational changes. The one that automatically triggers a federal audit if said officer is removed from the project. That's when he made his mistake. Instead of answering, instead of acknowledging that he hadn't read the contract he was taking over, he reached for his mouse. Mac, you're out of line. This is neither the time nor the place. And then he muted my microphone in front of 140 people in the room, 200 more watching online. cut me off mid-sentence like I was some rookie who didn't know when to shut up. The silence stretched out for maybe 10 seconds, but it felt like an hour. I could see faces in the room. Guys I'd worked with for decades, looking uncomfortable. Jimmy Martinez from the welding crew was staring at his shoes. Pete Sullivan from maintenance was looking at me like he wanted to say something but didn't know what. I closed my laptop and walked out. That evening, I sat at my kitchen table with a cup of coffee and tried to process what had just happened. 24 years at the same company, and I'd been publicly humiliated by someone who'd been there 6 months. Someone who didn't even understand the systems he was supposed to be managing. I pulled out the original Garrett contract again, all 847 pages. Found clause 6.4b on page 312 for what felt like the 100th time. The language was still crystal clear. Named safety compliance officer must maintain direct project oversight throughout contract duration. Voluntary resignation or involuntary removal of said officer constitutes material breach, triggering immediate contract review and potential termination pending federal compliance audit. The next day, Bryce called me into his office. He was sitting behind a desk that used to belong to my old boss, Ray Henderson, who'd actually understood manufacturing. Ray had started on the shop floor, worked his way up through every department. When Ray told you something about the equipment, you listened. Mac, I think we need to clear the air about yesterday's meeting. I sat down but didn't say anything. Let him talk. I appreciate your passion for the work, but we need to maintain professional decorum in company meetings. The way you handled that situation wasn't appropriate. Still nothing from me. In the Navy, we'd learned that sometimes silence was the best response. I'm willing to chalk it up to miscommunication and move forward, but I need your commitment that you'll work within the chain of command going forward. He was talking to me like I was some troublemaker, instead of the guy who'd kept his precious profit center running for half a decade, like I was the problem. Bryce, have you read the Garrett contract yet? Mac, we've been through this. I don't have time to memorize every line of every contract. That's what we have legal for. Section 12, subsection 6.4, B5 sentences. Should take you maybe 30 seconds. His jaw tightened. Are you questioning my competence? I'm asking if you've read the contract you're now responsible for. I've reviewed the relevant portions. Which portions are relevant? The deliverables, the timeline, the payment schedule. What about the safety requirements? That's operational detail. I focus on the big picture. There it was. The fundamental disconnect between someone who understood systems and someone who just moved numbers around on spreadsheets. Safety wasn't operational detail. It was the foundation everything else was built on, Bryce. That operational detail you're dismissing, it's federal law. And right now, I'm the only person in this building who's certified to sign off on it. We'll cross-train other people. Federal certification takes 18 months minimum. The contract expires in 14. For the first time since I'd known him, Bryce looked genuinely concerned. Like maybe he was starting to understand that manufacturing wasn't just another business where you could fake it till you made it. What exactly are you saying, Mac? I'm saying you should read the contract, all of it, starting with Section 12. I stood up to leave, then stopped at the door. One more thing. When Linda Garrett calls to ask why her safety reports are 2 days late, you might want to mention that you locked me out of the system. I didn't wait for his response. That afternoon, Linda Garrett called. I was in the break room getting coffee when my phone rang, and I recognized her number immediately. Mac, I haven't received this week's compliance reports. Everything okay on your end? I stepped outside where I could talk freely. Linda, we need to discuss some changes happening here. You sitting down? What kind of changes? New VP decided to streamline operations. I've been locked out of the reporting system. There was a long pause. Linda had been through the Hoffman disaster, and she didn't take safety shortcuts lightly. Locked out how? Badge access revoked, system permissions removed. As of yesterday, I can't even view the files I created. Mac, you know I can't accept reports from anyone else. The contract is very specific about this, I know. That's what I tried to explain to our new management. Another pause. Longer this time? Who's signing off on safety protocols now? Nobody, as far as I can tell. The VP says he'll cross-train someone, but you know how long certification takes, 18 months minimum. Her voice was getting that edge I remembered from the Hoffman negotiations. Mac, if you're not signing those reports, we have a problem. I know, a big problem. Federal compliance isn't negotiable. I know that too. What's your VP's name? Bryce Walsh. Been here 6 months. Has he read the contract? Says he has? I don't think he's made it past the payment schedule. Jesus, Linda never swore, so I knew she was rattled. Mac, I need those reports by end of day Friday, or I have to notify federal oversight. You understand what that means. Automatic audit? Potential shutdown? Contract review? Exactly. Can you get access restored? Working on it. Work faster. She hung up, and I stood there in the parking lot, watching the afternoon shift change. Guys who'd been coming to work at this plant longer than Bryce had been out of college, all of them depending on contracts like Garrett to keep the doors open. I went back inside and tried my badge on the Garrett files one more time. Still locked out. Tried my system login. Access denied. 24 years of building these systems, and I couldn't even look at my own work. That evening, I called my old supervisor from the Navy, Chief Petty Officer Rodriguez. He'd retired to Florida, spent his days fishing and complaining about how the Navy wasn't the same anymore. Mac, how the hell are you? Still playing with those factory toys? Hey, Chief. Yeah, still keeping the wheels turning. Got a question for you. Shoot. Remember when Ensign Patterson tried to override the reactor safety protocols on the Nimitz? How could I forget? Kid nearly got us all killed because he wanted to impress the captain with improved efficiency ratings. What happened to him? Court-martial, discharge. Last I heard he was selling insurance somewhere in Ohio. Why? Got a similar situation brewing here. New management thinks they can optimize safety procedures. Christ, Mac. You'd think people would learn. Safety protocols aren't suggestions. That's what I keep telling them. You documenting everything, every email, every access denial, every conversation. Good. See why a principle still applies in civilian life. How bad is it? Bad enough that I'm thinking about making some moves. What kind of moves? The kind that might get people's attention. Rodriguez was quiet for a moment. He'd seen enough Navy politics to understand what I was getting at. Mac, you sure about this? Once you pull that pin, there's no putting the grenade back together. I'm sure. All right then, just make sure you're ready for the consequences. Corporate world's got longer memories than the Navy. Thanks, Chief. Stay safe out there, Mac, and call me when it's over. I want to hear how this turns out. The next morning, I drafted my resignation letter. Nothing fancy, just 2 paragraphs stating my intention to leave and my last day of work. I dated it but didn't sign it, saved it to my desktop where I could see it every time I opened my laptop. For 3 days, I carried that letter around like a loaded weapon. Every time Bryce ignored a safety protocol, every time someone asked about the missing compliance reports, every time I got locked out of another system, I'd think about that document sitting on my desktop. Friday afternoon, Linda called again. Mac, I need those reports. I've got federal inspectors asking questions. Still locked out, Linda. Management says they're working on it. This is serious, Mac. If I don't have certified safety documentation by Monday, I have to shut down the line pending audit. I understand. Do you? Because we're talking about $14 million worth of equipment sitting idle while bureaucrats crawl through every bolt and bearing. Linda, I've been trying to get access restored for a week. You need to call Bryce directly. I tried. He keeps telling me it's a minor technical issue that'll be resolved soon. It's not technical, it's political. Then unpolitical, it's fast. That evening, I sat at my kitchen table with the contract spread out in front of me and my resignation letter open on the laptop screen. 2 pieces of paper that could change everything. I thought about the guys on the shop floor, the ones who'd be hurt if the contract got canceled. Jimmy Martinez had twin boys starting college next year. Pete Sullivan was 6 months from retirement. Good people who didn't deserve to get caught in the crossfire of corporate stupidity. But then I thought about the Hoffman disaster. About what happens when safety gets treated like a suggestion instead of a requirement. 3 weeks of operation before someone got hurt bad enough that federal investigators had to step in. Lucky nobody died. I signed the resignation letter and set it aside. Monday morning, I got to work early and made my rounds on the production floor. Everything was running smooth, all tolerances within spec vibration patterns normal. The equipment was fine, it was the management that was broken. At 8:55, I joined the weekly operations meeting, same conference room where Bryce had humiliated me the week before, but this time I was ready. At exactly 9 a.m., I joined the weekly operations meeting. Bryce was already talking when I connected. Something about enhanced operational efficiency and streamlined processes. Same buzzword soup, different day. I set my phone to record, old Navy habit when dealing with incompetent officers, and waited for the right moment. Before we move on, I said, unmuting my microphone, I need to address the Garrett compliance issue. Bryce's smile tightened. Mac, we've discussed this. The technical team is handling the transition. What technical team? You locked me out of the system a week ago, and Linda Garrett's been calling about missing safety reports. That's an internal matter we're resolving. No, Bryce, it's a federal compliance matter. And as of this morning, Garrett's threatening to shut down operations pending audit. I could see faces in the room starting to pay attention. These weren't corporate executives. They were manufacturing people who understood what a federal audit meant. Shutdown, lost contracts, layoffs. Mac, this isn't the appropriate forum. When $14 million in revenue is at risk, every forum is appropriate. You're being dramatic. We have contingency plans. What contingencies? You can't certify safety systems you don't understand. That's when I saw it, the same look he'd had when I asked if he'd read the contract. Deer in headlights, trying to bluff his way through something he didn't comprehend. I'm confident in our team's abilities. Your team doesn't exist, Bryce. Federal certification takes 18 months. The contract expires in 14. We'll work with Garrett to extend the timeline. No, you won't, because Linda Garrett learned from the Hoffman disaster that safety compromises kill contracts. The room was dead quiet now. Everyone understood the reference. Hoffman Industries had been the cautionary tale in our industry for 5 years. Mac, you're way out of line here. I'm trying to save this company from making the same mistake Hoffman made. But you won't let me. I reached into my briefcase and pulled out the resignation letter I'd carried for 3 days. Held it up so the camera could see it clearly. Effective immediately, I said, and uploaded it to the company portal. The timestamp read 9:02 a.m. The silence stretched for maybe 15 seconds. Bryce's face went through several expressions: confusion, realization, then something approaching panic. Mac, wait, we can discuss this. Nothing to discuss. You wanted me out of the picture, now you've got your wish. I could see other faces in the video grid, guys I'd worked with for decades. Jimmy Martinez looked like someone had punched him. Pete Sullivan was shaking his head. You can't just quit in the middle of a project. Watch me. I closed my laptop, cleaned out my locker for the second time in a week, and walked to my truck. The morning air was crisp, clean, and quiet, except for the hum of the production line still running behind me. By 10:30, my phone was buzzing with calls from management, but I didn't answer. There wasn't anything left to discuss. At 11:15, Linda Garrett called. Mac, I just got your resignation notification from your HR department. What the hell is going on? You'll need to ask Bryce Walsh. He's the VP of operations now. Mac, you know what this means? Without your certification, I have to shut down the line. I know. Federal audit gets triggered automatically. I know that too. The contract goes into review status pending compliance verification. Section 12, subsection 6.4b. I wrote it, remember? There was a long pause. Mac, this is $14 million we're talking about. I'm aware of the numbers, Linda. Can you come back? Work out whatever issues you're having with management? Bridge is burned. Deliberately, another pause. All right then, I'll start the shutdown procedures. This is going to hurt a lot of people. It already was hurting people. Now, it's just going to hurt the right ones. By noon, the federal compliance review was triggered. By 1 p.m., Garrett had issued formal notice of contract suspension pending safety certification. By 3 p.m., the board was in emergency session. I found out later that they tried everything. Called in favors with federal regulators, offered to pay for expedited certification, even tried to hire Hoffman's old safety officer out of retirement. Nothing worked. Federal law doesn't negotiate. At 5:47 p.m., Bryce Walsh was terminated for cause. The board offered me his job, along with a 40% raise and a public apology. I declined. The next day, I drove to North Carolina to meet with a small engineering firm that had reached out through industry contacts. No corporate politics, no MBA graduates trying to optimize things they didn't understand. Just 8 engineers who built systems that worked and respected the people who maintained them. We heard what happened up in Pittsburgh. The owner said during our interview, took guts to walk away from a contract that big. Wasn't about guts. It was about doing the right thing. That's exactly why we want you here. I signed their offer letter that afternoon. Better pay, better benefits. And a clause in my employment contract that guaranteed I couldn't be removed from safety-critical projects without federal approval. 3 months later, Ironworks Solutions lost the Garrett contract permanently. Federal auditors found 23 safety violations that had accumulated during the week I was locked out of the system. The company laid off 60 people, including most of the guys I'd worked with for decades. Jimmy Martinez found work at a plant in Ohio. Pete Sullivan took early retirement. Both of them called to thank me for trying to prevent what everyone knew was coming. The vibration readings at my new job are perfect. Steady, smooth, no irregularities. That's how you know a system's built right, and more importantly, that it's run by people who understand the difference between optimization and destruction. Look, if you're reading this and you're dealing with some young hotshot who thinks experience is just another word for outdated, here's what I learned. Sometimes the best thing you can do for everyone involved is walk away. Not out of anger, not for revenge, but because some lessons can only be taught the hard way. You can't save people from their own stupidity, but you don't have to enable it either. Know your worth. Know your leverage, and when push comes to shove, be ready to use both. The guys who really matter will understand. The ones who don't were never worth saving anyway.